In Peru, thousands mobilized in the so-called third takeover of Lima to express a rejection of the appointed president Dina Boluarte. In Thailand, the Constitutional Court suspended leading Prime Ministerial candidate Pita from being a lawmaker. Supporters of the Move Forward party leader gathered in front of parliament to reject the court's decision. And in Israel, thousands began a three-day march from Tel Aviv to occupy Jerusalem to protest against the government's proposed judicial overhaul. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Alenda Prozabal from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Thousands of Peruvians traveled to the capital of the country to join on Wednesday the so-called third takeover of Lima. The appointed president Dina Boluarte described the action as a call for war. Social organizations and citizens gathered in the Peruvian capital to march to the government palace in rejection to the presidency of Dina Boluarte and the country's Congress. Demonstrators criticized the president's statement, who called the protest as a threat to democracy. In turn, the citizens demanded the resignation of Boluarte to recover their political, economic, and social rights that were taken away from them. In Peru, different delegations gathered to start a unified march in the context of the third takeover of Lima, and the government have filled the streets with police and road closure that have been reported in several regions. Our correspondent Jaime Herrera has more details.
We inform you from the San Martin Square that different delegations from different regions of the country are already gathering, but also union movements and organizations from Lima, who started to mobilize towards the 2 de Mayo Square, the place of concentration for a unified march, which still does not have a specific route and is intended to reach one of the branches of the government, the Congress of the Republic, or as close to the government palace as possible. In addition, many of the streets in downtown Lima are practically militarized, with Peruvian National Police, and also in some of the highways in the interior of the country with army troops. There have even been some road blockades in regions such as Puno, Madre de Dios, and Ancas. We will be watching what happens here in Peru.
In Brazil, many low-income individuals have turned to collecting empty aluminum cans on the streets as a way to earn a living. One such people is Shirley Aparecida de Souza, 38 years old. She's at the front lines of the recycling cycle, of which Brazil has become an outstanding example. She's one of the 1 million individual collectors in Brazil who have become a fundamental part of the process. Shirley is part of an independent cooperative which sells the aluminum to scrap leaders at collection centers, which in turn supply the large recyclers. The Recycled Cans Association, which groups recyclers and manufacturers, reported that in 2022, for the first time ever, the amount of recycled cans equaled to the amount of cans being manufactured, which meant a reduction of 15 billion tons in the amount of greenhouse effect gases being released into the atmosphere.
We leave home about 7 a.m. to scavenge for recycling materials before the garbage collectors come. Otherwise, we won't get anything. We collect some and then go home, and in the afternoon we separate it. Some people call it a good job. They say, at least you're working, but others are snobby about it, so that's hard.
In the United States on Tuesday, in the city of Phoenix, Sympathy Records broke a 49-year record with its 19th day of thermal reading of 43.3 degrees Celsius or higher. The city of Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the country with a population of 1.6 million people. It belongs to Maricopa County, where the Department of Public Health confirmed 12 heat-associated deaths so far in 2023. An authority highlighted that nearly 3,000 people visit emergency rooms statewide each year due to the heat-related illnesses. On the other hand, U.S. weather authorities have recorded several nationwide high temperature records and warned that they will continue to affect millions of people. World Health Organization chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says that the current record-setting heat wave in the northern hemisphere is putting increased strain on healthcare systems everywhere.
Extreme heat takes the greatest toll on those least able to manage its consequences, such as older people, infants and children, and the poor and homeless. It also puts increased pressure on health systems. Exposure to excessive heat has wide-ranging impacts for health, often amplifying pre-existing conditions and resulting in premature death and disability.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, new dates, and more. Other studies coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. On July 23rd, Spain will elect through parliamentary seats a new government or the continuity of the current one. According to analysts, the right wing is set to return to power in Sunday's election. Everything indicates that the Conservative People's Party will retain the reins of the Moncloa Palace. According to polls and political analysts, the PP will ultimately have to pact with the far-right Vox, a party that denies climate change, gender violence, and even the United Nations 2030 agenda. As the polls predicts, the socialist Pedro Sánchez is defeated, Alberto Núñez Feijóo, a Galician politician with a long career, will most likely become the future president. In Russia, the defense minister reported on Wednesday that its forces had advanced 1 kilometer along the front line in Ukraine's northeastern region of Kharkiv.
The region units of the Western Group of Russian forces continue successful offensive actions in the area under their responsibility. Over the last day, the advance of Russian units amounted to more than a kilometer in depth and up to 2 kilometers along the front. The advancing units captured the Morchanovo railway station in the Kharkiv region.
The Russian defense minister's spokesperson added that Ukrainian military industrial facilities were hit with long-range precision-guided missiles near Odessa port.
Tonight, Russia's armed forces carry out a group strike with long-range precision-guided air and sea-launched weapons against military industrial facilities, infrastructure for fuel and ammunition depots of the Ukrainian armed forces near the city of Odessa.
After the Select EU summit ended, President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva stated that Brazil wants the conflict in Ukraine to stop. He added that a group of countries capable of finding the path to peace needs to be built.
I think there are a lot of people who were very nervous and very enthusiastic 6 months ago, and who now need to find someone who represents the possibility of finding the path to peace. That's what Brazil has been doing all along. We are talking to China, we are talking to Indonesia, we are talking to our partners in Latin America. We need to build a group of countries capable of convincing Russia and Ukraine at the right time. That's the way forward. What we want is for the war to stop. We need to sit down and talk. That's what we want. We don't even know if they will take part in the agreement, and we don't know who the mediators will be.
In this context, the Brazilian president also spoke about the tensions between the regional blocs prior to the EU Select Summit held this week.
Europe sent an aggressive letter to Mercosur, a letter that threatened sanctions if we didn't meet certain environmental requirements. And we told the European Union that strategic partners don't talk with threats, we discussed with proposals.
For his part, the Argentine Ministry of Foreign Affairs highlighted the recognition by the European Union of the Latin American position on the Mobile Island, which defends dialogue and respect for international law. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs considered as a diplomatic achievement the inclusion of the issue in the final declaration of the third summit of heads of states and governments of the EU and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, held in Brussels, Belgium. The consensus document highlights that the EU takes note of the historical position of CELAC based on the importance of dialogue and respect for international law in the peaceful settlement of disputes. It is the first time in the history of bi-regional relations the EU officially recognizes in a joint declaration the position of CELAC with respect to the island. South Korea's Defense General Staff reported on Wednesday that North Korea had launched two ballistic missiles into the East Sea. Japanese authorities also denounced the Pyongyang government's military action. And tensions on the Korean peninsula have been on the rise in recent hours amid an expanded nuclear meeting in Seoul involving the United States, South Korea, and the arrival of a U.S. nuclear submarine off the South Korean coast on a breach of border security apparently perpetrated by a U.S. serviceman. Despite attempts at jump-starting diplomacy, the geopolitical dynamics on the Korean peninsula remain largely unaltered, as North Korea has previously stated that it will only give up its nuclear weapons in exchange for concrete moves to reduce perceived U.S. threats against it. North Korean leaders have previously warned of stronger actions in response to U.S. sanctions. On Wednesday, China called on parties involving tensions in the Korean peninsula to work for a political settlement.
The current resurgence of tensions in the peninsula is clear. It is worrisome that the relevant parties are using the peninsula issue to seek geopolitical gains, escalate tensions in the region, and undermine the demilitarization of the peninsula. We hope all parties would adhere to the direction of the political settlement, address each other's legitimate concerns in a balanced manner through meaningful dialogue, and maintain peace and stability in the peninsula.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. Thailand's Constitutional Court suspended a leading prime ministerial candidate and winner of May nationwide elections, Pita from being a lawmaker. The move is the latest setback for Pita's usually popular progressive opposition party, following a nearly decade of turbulent military-backed rule. The temporary suspension follows a complaint filed by the Election Commission against the Move Forward party leader, accusing him of violating election laws for allegedly holding shares in a media company. Pita has denied he broke election rules and previously accused the Election Commission of rushing the case to court. Move Forward party pledged deep structural reforms, from the changes to the military to the previously untouchable monarchy. The May election, which saw a record turnout, delivered a powerful rebuke to the military-backed establishment that has ruled Thailand since 2014. Supporters of Thai reformist Pita gathered outside Parliament to protest against the Constitutional Court's decision to suspend the Prime Minister candidate. Lawmakers are forbidden from owning shares in media companies under Thailand's constitution, though the television station in question has no broadcast since 2007. Protesters announced plans for a large public rally near the Democracy Monument in downtown Bangkok. Pita remains eligible to stand as a candidate for Prime Minister but will not be able to participate in any votes.
Why ask people to go to the poor? Why don't you just pick someone from your families to be the Prime Minister? Then, just close down this country and say that this country doesn't have democracy like Myanmar. Why don't you do that? Why ask people to go vote and waste their money and time?
Pita is not wrong at all. He did everything right. But there's one person who doesn't want him to become Prime Minister, because he is afraid that Pita will reform the army and many organizations that they are.
In Israel, demonstrators started a three-day march on the 43-mile road from the Aviv to Jerusalem. They are protesting the government proposed judicial overhaul, for they said it poses a threat to democracy. The march was announced on Tuesday evening, and thousands of demonstrators blocked train stations and rode across the country in the run-up to a parliament vote on a key cause of the reform agenda. The judicial reform plan announced in January has split the nation and sparked one of Israel's biggest ever protest movements, with weekly demonstrations often by tens of thousands. The protest action comes as President Isaac Herzog is in Washington for an official visit. Bilateral relations have been strained under the current Netanyahu administration, which assumed power late last year, and Biden has voiced criticism of the proposed judicial reforms. On Wednesday, Israeli occupation forces fired missiles in Damascus, the Syrian capital, in an unprovoked aggression which violated Syrian sovereignty. According to media reports, Syrian air defense systems quickly intercepted the attack, with explosions being heard in the sky over the outskirts of Damascus. And the Syrian Minister of Defense said besides on infrastructure damage, 2 Syrian Arab army soldiers were injured during the missile attack, which originated in the occupied Golan Heights. This is the second such attack on this month of July, and that such acts of aggression are commonplace in Syria, with Israeli occupation continuously violating the country's airspace. The conflict in Sudan continues to place civilians in an alarming rate. Last week alone, more than 200,000 people were displaced by the fighting. The figure has been coined by the International Organization for Migration, an agency attached to the United Nations. Since April, when hostilities began, 2.6 million people have been internally displaced in the African nation engulfed in a fierce war. Another 730,000 people have fled across the border. While in Darfur, in the north of the country, the Children's Fund and the World Health Organization are trying to alleviate the sanitary, nutritional, and health condition of thousands of children and women. A suspected gas explosion in the central business district of South Africa's commercial capital of Johannesburg left several people injured. One of Johannesburg's streets was affected by an explosion, allegedly coming from the subway gas pipeline. Images circulated on social networks show vehicles overturned amid huge crowds rolling across the road. According to local media, the incident in the center of South Africa's largest city has left 9 people injured and around 23 vehicles damaged. The local authorities have already opened an investigation to clarify the facts. And emergency services have cordoned off the site and urged residents of neighboring buildings to evacuate. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on the website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Ana Rosabal. Thank you for watching.